Hey guys, welcome back. We are just doing a quick part 2 to the Heal Through It series, as these bosses have become a little bit more difficult as we have progressed throughout the season. Anub'Ikkaj is the second boss of the Dawnbreaker, who has a combination of large single group-wide hits, more of a bursty tantrum group-wide damage, as well as significant tank damage, and then there's a couple overlaps that can make this fight super difficult. While this may not be an option for every group, I highly recommend attempting to pull a few mobs into the boss on pull to utilize Mistweaver's strength, which is healing with multiple targets, but again, this is mostly up to your tank and if they can handle it. Part of why these bosses are so challenging for Mistweaver is the single enemy aspect. The boss will also summon small mobs that tend to die pretty fast, and juggling kicks and stops can be overwhelming pretty quickly. If these mobs are active during the Shadowy Decay, this is the tantrum damage, then you can definitely use Crackling Jade Lightning with Jade Empowerment and be super safe. You will get good overlaps of ad spawns and Shadowy Decay later on in the fight, but otherwise it's not a natural overlap, so if you're not pulling mobs onto the boss and you're not keeping the spawns alive on purpose for healing, this fight is much more reliant on enveloping mist ramping and renewing mist with Chi Harmony. Your main playstyle loop on this fight is going to be rotating between Shaylin's Gift, Chi-Ji, Revival, and Life Cocoon. These are our main cooldowns and typically what we're using on the Shadowy Decay tantrum damage. For the Dark Orb, you shouldn't need to send any cooldowns here as long as it's not an overlap, so you can use healing from Jade Empowerment since you're more likely to have mobs active during the orbs rather than the decay. When you're topping people off after the orb and you don't have any mobs, you can just use Vivify in the beginning of your enveloping mist ramp to prep from the Dark Orb into the decay. This is a fight where you will benefit greatly from pre-assigning defensives or letting people know when you're not going to have any cooldowns just due to the natural downtime of the spec. On mechanics where you do have few cooldowns to work with, you're going to be using Enveloping Mist on your DPS, and also try to have Chi Harmony on them and use your Thunder Focus Tea for triage as well as proccing your Zen Pulse. Ideally, you will have personals or other group DR assigned to Shadowy Decays or Dark Orb overlaps where you don't have your own healing cooldowns. And typically for Life Cocoon specifically, I am looking for players who are low from a previous mechanic, have a cast going off on them from a mob, or if they don't have a defensive for the overlap or the decay. This was our first attempt on a 17, so there's a couple misplays on my part, one of which is sending my Shaylin's Gift early here, right before the overlap. So on the mechanics where you have very few cooldowns to work with, you are going to be casting Enveloping Mist on your DPS, try to have Chi Harmony on them, and use their Thunder Focus Tea for triage to proc the Zen Pulse. Ideally, you'll have personal defensives or other group DRs assigned here when you don't have your own healing cooldowns, but we just got kind of caught in a weird spot right there. Typically for Cocoon, I am looking for players who are low from a previous mechanic or have a cast going off on them, as well as not having a defensive for the overlap or even just a single decay. At certain points here, I do kind of abandon my Chi-Ji cooldown even with multiple targets because I have my Jade Empowerment available. So for this one, I'm kind of just spreading my Enveloping Mist using the pre-stack of Blackout Kick that I have and then opting for the Jade Empowerment since that is going to do more healing with the cadence that we needed. It would have taken me too long to build up more Chi-Ji stacks than it would for us to die to the damage. So Jade Empowerment was a much faster heal there, and that's why I opted to abandon my Chi-Ji. You will see this a lot in hierarchies because Chi-Ji is not enough on single target to heal through a lot of these mechanics, so it's usually used as kind of a tool to make other cooldowns stronger rather than its own cooldown itself. This is much later in the fight than we have seen due to key level. We're about 4 minutes almost into this fight because we had pulled ads in, but we've only been fighting the boss for like 3:45. But we had another Orb and Shadowy Decay overlap. Previously, we had only ever seen this overlap once, but it is something to keep in mind as you get into higher key levels, is that these overlaps are going to become more common, and you may see mechanics matching up with each other that previously didn't, just due to fight length. The Coaglamation is the third boss of City of Threads, and while health bars don't really move too much, there is a decent heal check due to the constant heal absorbs coming out. Typically, you're going to be healing through the absorbs naturally with no cooldowns, or Shaylin's Gifts early on at the most. Your cooldowns like Life Cocoon, Revival, Chi-Ji, and your Shaylins will be used during the Dark Pulse, which is a bursty tantrum type of damage. This is also where personal defensives and group defensives are assigned. You kind of throw the entire kitchen sink at these dark pulses since they are the main damage portion of the fight, and there is so few of them. Realistically, you should only be getting 2 or 3 dark pulses. If it's a 15 or higher key and you're lusting this boss, you should only get 2 and then maybe the first couple of ticks of the 3rd dark pulse. I do want to mention that in this footage, I'm actually using Chi before the Dark Pulse goes out, and this is mostly just for healing off our last set of absorbs, since the Paladin is going to be bubble soaking the absorbs directly before the Dark Pulse. We've also pre-assigned the defenses and the group cooldowns for this fight, but normally for pugs, and for most groups, I would recommend holding Chi for the Dark Pulse, utilizing your Chi Cocoons, that pre-ramp, and then finishing that healing phase with either Shaylin's Gift or Revival. Normally I'll use Chi-Ji, Shaylun's, and Life Cocoon on the first, and then Chi-Ji, Shaylun's, and Revival on the second, but if you are using Conduit of the Celestials, you can fit that in during a Dark Pulse or during one of the normal healing phases. You may also, if you're running Uplifted Spirits, be able to get an additional Revival over the course of the fight. In this footage, I am playing Master of Harmony, but I would probably recommend swapping to Conduit for this dungeon due to this boss, the 2 mini-bosses before the last boss, and the last boss itself. City of Threads is one of the few dungeons where we face one-shot territory multiple times in a short window and over the course of multiple encounters. That 5% shield from Oxbox are extremely helpful for the group, as well as the cooldown reduction on Life Cocoon, and the fact that it is a personal defensive with Jade Sanctuary and its own additional healing cooldown. This fight is one of the few encounters where we actually do need to be mindful of our mana use as well as our mana T use, because there is a lot of casting this fight. There is a lot more mana consumption than normal, just due to the heal absorbs and the amount of casting and the damage profile. We can't rely on our ancient teachings quite as much as normal, so definitely be aware of that during this fight. For E.D.N.A, this is the first boss of the Stonevault. There's not a whole lot to say for this fight, since it's actually less of a heal check and more of a strategy that you'll need to discuss with your group. Mistweaver is much better at large instances of damage as opposed to smaller, more frequent instances. This is because of things like Shaylin's Gift, Revival, and Vivify with Zen Pulse, where they're kind of these one-off heals that don't offer any support after the cast, so you feel like you're kind of trying to snipe the damage when it's staggered or dot damage. So because you are actually able to pick the type of damage you're getting on E.D.N.A, I would recommend doing the 1-1-4 strategy. This means that you're breaking 1 pillar per spawn and letting the boss blow up the remaining 4 with the Earth Shatterer ability. You will heal through the individual stack with normal healing spells and not committing any cooldowns, and then you'll send defensives as well as healing cooldowns on the Earth Shatterer and the 4 stack of the dot. This fits our profile much better because we have large, heavy-hitting one-time cooldowns, again like Revival, Shaylin's Gift, and all of those things, that don't tend to handle dot damage very well, especially on a single target situation like E.D.N.A. So if we have the option to deal with one large instance of damage, then that is going to fit Mistweaver's toolkit much better than something like a 2-2-2 strat, where you are going to be having this damage that is more than our maintenance healing can handle, but you still can't really commit a cooldown because it's not enough damage, so it's kind of a weird situation. But highly recommend 1-1-4, I think that fits us the best. We usually will have our range player be in charge of the single pillar break. Melee will just stack, and then the ranged player will stand away and break their own as the single. It's also much easier for them to not get hit by other lines because they are out in ranged and have a little bit more space to move. This is another one of the few bosses where you do need to be mindful of your mana and your mana to usage. Typically you can just wait until you get high enough stacks, like 15 stacks, and then drink it down and you'll be fine. But on a higher key or in a pug where they may not be using their cooldowns quite as effectively, you may want to pay a little bit more attention to your mana in general. This is also one of the only dungeons, actually, I think, that you would ever consider running Restoral, just because you don't want to have Revival as a healing cooldown and accidentally dispel your tank from his debuff when he'll need it for the next Seismic Smash. So this is a dungeon that only has this magic dispel, and everything else is some other class or is not dispellable. So Restoral is actually a really good idea in here. And lastly, we have Skarmorak, who is either the second or third boss in the Stonevault, depending on your route. This boss is largely a group effort on not overlapping the crystals, but making sure they're still dying, and saving defensives and damage cooldowns for the intermission shield breaking phase. Typically, I will take around 2 orbs during the normal phase to help heal off of the crystal damage and get prepped for the shield phase. Right before the shield phase, I would like to grab a third orb if available to refresh and strengthen my healing for the real damage phase. This fight has kind of a weird damage pattern where it's pretty inconsistent based on the shards and how frequently they're dying and how many you actually are going to kill as a group. But this is why it is really important to constantly be refreshing your Renewing Mist, both for the Chi Harmony and for the cleave healing if you need it. This is a fight where if you do not have damage cooldowns going into the shield or a lust or some other thing to make it go quicker, you can pre-ramp with Enveloping Mist and Chi Harmony before the shield phase just to make sure that everyone is healthy for the first few ticks so you can see how long it's going to take and then commit another further cooldown after that. These phases are usually pretty short, so I try to have a Chi-Ji for each one or a large personal defensive and life cocoon into a Shaylin's Gift, and then Revival is either hit or miss on whether you're using it on a shield phase or on 2 crystals dying extremely close together. The rest of this fight is pretty rinse and repeat. It's kind of repetitive between phase 1 and phase 2, but I just want to let it play so that you guys can see more of the fight and how we handle things, as well as our defensive use. I was having some internet problems this night on stream, so I do actually lag out here. That is not your video having problems, that was me. Not really sure what happened during this, but somehow we all lived, so it worked out. But that is just why it looks like this. And that is all I have for you guys in this video. I hope that it was helpful. If you have any comments or questions, you can hit me up on Twitch or YouTube while I'm live, in the comments, or in my Discord. I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.